My name is Madison Cole, and for a long time, I believed I had found the perfect way to live above the rules that bind the rest of us to the monotony of honesty. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a refined version of myself, impeccably presented, with haute couture clothes, always manicured nails, and a smile practiced enough to convey credibility. However, there is something perverse about living using a carefully constructed image to hide the true intentions of the heart, and this perversity consumed every part of my identity until I could no longer distinguish who I was from who I pretended to be. I didn't wield weapons or break into safes, because what I stole couldn't be kept in metal boxes. I stole trust, and once someone gave you trust, the rest came with almost shameful ease. I specialized in reading people, discovering their emotional needs, and turning that into opportunity. If a man was lonely, I became warmth. If a businessman needed partnership, I transformed into admiration and validation. If someone was vulnerable, I offered support. The truth is, I delivered nothing but illusions, but I did it with such precision that even I believed in the performance at certain moments. The money I acquired had no smell, but it came impregnated with tears, nights of anguish, and shattered dreams of people who blindly trusted in something that was never real. Nothing about me was genuine, and despite that, I felt invincible, as if I were capable of manipulating any situation to my advantage. I fed on the feeling of being above the consequences, believing that intelligence justified everything. The world revered me, even without knowing my real name, and I accepted this silent adoration as if it were a well-deserved reward, when in reality, I was lost, empty, and completely blind to the spiritual abyss I myself was digging. Deep down, I knew that living this way had an expiration date, but I chose to ignore the silent warning that echoed within me, because I still hadn't discovered just how low a person can sink when sin becomes routine. And it was precisely at that moment that everything began to change. I know this testimony has already made you feel that something bigger is happening here. Don't leave the video. Subscribe and leave a like, because what comes next isn't entertainment, it's a warning. Let's continue. When the money started rolling in effortlessly, my sense of reality began to distort. I believed that luxury justified any moral sacrifice, and that owning expensive things validated my personal worth. Every trip I took, every hotel I stayed in, and every dinner with influential people was a reminder that I had won the game of life while others were still struggling. I felt untouchable, as if I had discovered a secret code that most people would never know. The first large sums appeared quickly, and with them came invitations to exclusive events, private parties, and trips to places I would never have gone without that. Lifestyle. It wasn't just the money. It was the status of being where few can be, surrounded by people who flaunted victories but carried emptiness similar to mine. I allowed myself to be intoxicated by the feeling of control. I became who people needed to see. In an investor's room, I was intelligence, focus, and strategy. In an expensive restaurant, I was charm, grace, and mystery. In a discreet hotel bar, I was carefully rehearsed vulnerability, capable of triggering someone's protective instinct. It was a refined dance between emotional seduction and psychological manipulation, all done with such delicacy that even the victim believed they were in control. I perceived that each person had a weak point, and when I found it, a compliment, a glance, or a vague promise was enough to start the process. Money was no longer a necessity, it was an obsession. I sought the adrenaline rush of seeing money transferred, of watching someone else lose control while I maintained my dominance. When I walked through a hotel lobby with designer bags, high heels, and sunglasses, I felt like the world was at my feet. However, all this sensation came at an invisible price. The more I grew on the outside, the more I withered on the inside. I spent absurd amounts of money on clothes and treatments to maintain the perfect image, as if appearance were the only way to prevent me from facing the inner decay I hid from everyone. Instead of realizing I was losing my identity, I called this emptiness freedom. I convinced myself I had no shackles, but in reality, I was chained to the sin I chose to feed. I believed I had everything, until one detail began to haunt me. No matter how much money and luxury I accumulated, I never felt satisfied. It was as if something inside me knew that this glory had an expiration date, but I preferred to ignore it, until the day a specific choice opened a door that I would never be able to close again. Have you ever felt that something seemed like a success, but inside it was killing your soul? Comment below. I've felt that emptiness before. The first time I crossed the line of conscious deception didn't happen in a dark alley, nor in a context of despair, but rather inside a luxurious room, where the silence smelled of expensive perfume and the city lights illuminated the glass windows. A businessman, emotionally exhausted after a devastating divorce, confided in me that he was on the verge of a major decision and needed to trust someone who wasn't interested in his money. He chose me because he believed in the image of balance, empathy, and security that I knew how to perfectly represent. As he spoke, I realized I possessed all the information I needed to manipulate him, including momentary access to the digital signature that would allow a significant bank transfer. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the awareness that this was the decisive moment. I could leave that room and go on with a normal life, or I could cross that invisible boundary and experience absolute power over the vulnerability of a human being. When I finished the transfer, I felt an intense and unexpected shiver, as if the world had handed me a key I didn't know existed. I should have felt guilty, but what took over was an intoxicating excitement, as if I had touched a secret source of power and finally understood how the game worked. I went home mentally repeating that no one would notice, that it was just money, that the man would recover, that I deserved it because of my intelligence. I constructed justifications, and with them, I also built the first cell of my emotional captivity. When I realized there were no immediate consequences, something inside me died and gave way to a new version, a version that no longer considered the other person as a human being, but as an opportunity for profit. It was that night that I understood that sin is never enough to steal everything at once. It begins by taking away only sensitivity. Because after the heart hardens, the rest becomes much easier to take away. And I still had no idea how much this small detour would open a door that I would never be able to close. Do you believe there is a specific moment when the soul realizes it is drifting away from God? Comment below. I recognize this falling point. After that first blow, something inside me changed so silently that I didn't realize when I stopped feeling. What had previously caused hesitation now seemed like strategy. I began to see people as walking numbers, as pieces on a chessboard that I could move with skill and coldness. I observed minute details, the way someone held their glass, the rhythm of their breathing, the tone of voice when they spoke about something that hurt them. I specialized in transforming vulnerabilities into wide-open doors to profit. The pity I should have felt was replaced by a sense of triumph, as if each new manipulation were another medal on my chest. Nothing seemed wrong anymore, because I no longer recognized the pain of others as something real. Over time, I began to test boundaries. If I perceived that someone was insecure in the area of relationships, I would insinuate emotional interest, creating a romantic scenario just to intensify emotional dependence and then take something in return. If it was a businessman craving admiration, I would become what he wanted to see. If it was someone lonely, I would promise connection. I wasn't offering myself. I was offering carefully constructed projections. At times, while writing manipulative messages, I felt as if my words had invisible threads binding that person's soul. And instead of feeling guilty, I felt powerful. The coldness was so profound that when someone cried before me, begging for explanations about the sudden disappearance of money or unsigned contracts, I would simply observe in silence, analyzing the best narrative to leave the scene without a trace. The crying didn't touch me. The pain didn't pierce me. It was as if I had switched off an internal switch and now functioned on autopilot, focused only on the next financial goal. The emptiness grew, and I filled that void with more luxury, more travel, more shopping, trying to silence the deafening silence that arose when I was alone. With each blow, my humanity became more distant, as if I were walking away from myself and didn't know how to return. Even so, there were moments when something whispered inside me, as if a soft voice questioned the path I was choosing. However, I ignored it, turning up the volume of the world to drown out the call of conscience. I silenced the last spark of sensitivity within me when I looked at a weeping victim and felt absolutely nothing. And it was at this point of complete numbness that something began to happen to my body, something so unexpected that it would shatter my illusion of control. Have you ever noticed when God tries to warn you before disaster strikes? Comment. I recognize the signs. The life I thought I controlled began to crumble the moment I decided to undergo a simple cosmetic surgery, something that, in my mind, would only reinforce the flawless image I projected to the world. I always said my appearance was part of my business, so being perfect was essential for people to continue believing in the persona I had created. I entered the hospital like someone entering a luxury spa, smiling at the staff, joking with the anesthesiologist, and texting a target I was already preparing for my next attack. There was no fear in me, only a rush to wake up quickly and continue the life of manipulation I had mastered. When they put the anesthesia mask on my face, I remember feeling a brief discomfort, something that felt like a tightness in my chest, but I ignored it. The anesthesiologist asked me to breathe deeply, and I obeyed, believing I was completely in control, as I always had been. However, seconds later, a strange sensation took over my body, a kind of weight that descended from my shoulders to my fingertips, as if someone were draining my life force. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out, and the last thing I saw was lights becoming distorted, as if the ceiling was receding from me. Then, everything became too quiet. There was no pain, only the clear and terrifying awareness that something had been switched off inside me. I heard alarms, hurried voices, and a doctor saying, "She's going into cardiac arrest." But the sounds seemed to echo from far away, as if I were trapped behind an invisible wall. I realized that, for the first time, I couldn't manipulate anything. I couldn't lie, negotiate, or run away. I was facing something I had never considered, the real possibility of running out of time. And it was at that very moment that something impossible happened, something that should not be seen by human eyes. Are you prepared for what happens when the soul realizes that the body no longer responds? I don't know exactly when I stopped feeling my body, but I remember the sensation of being pulled out of myself, as if something were peeling away invisible layers that kept me bound to matter. One instant, I was in the operating room, lying down and surrounded by frenzied people, and the next I was above it all, observing the scene from an impossible angle. Confusion overwhelmed me, because the consciousness I had there wasn't the same as my body's. It was broader, more awakened, as if I could finally see, without the filter of illusions I had built up throughout my life. I saw every expression on the faces of the medical team, perceived the tension in the anesthesiologist's muscles, the concern in the nurse's voice, and the urgency of the surgeon trying to restore my heart rhythm, but I couldn't reconnect with my body no matter how hard I tried, and this impossibility awakened a panic I had never experienced, not even in the riskiest stunts I had ever performed. While trying to understand what was happening, I realized something that completely chilled me. I was conscious, thinking, feeling, and perceiving everything, but I no longer had control over any physical movement. The scene before me became increasingly distant, and I began to be pulled backward, as if a silent wind were dragging me away from the center of the room. I tried to scream, I tried to call the doctors, I tried to beg for help, but there was no sound, only desperate thoughts echoing within my own mind. A sensation of falling began to form, not a physical fall, but a plunge into a void I couldn't identify, a space where there was no ground, time, texture, or reference point. The further I moved away from my body, the more I realized that the life I had defended with such pride was about to completely slip from my hands. It was then that a question took shape within me, as if emerging from a place I had never visited. If I am not my body, then who am I? The instant this awareness reached my soul, an overwhelming truth imposed itself. Everything I had built was there, immobile, vulnerable, and powerless, while I continued to be dragged along by something I could not control. I looked at myself on the table, intubated, surrounded by machines, and realized that no wealth, no luxury, and no lie could bring me back. The war I had always believed I could win with my strategies was finally lost, because in that world, manipulation is impossible. And it was precisely when fear gripped me that a presence emerged, silent and overwhelming, bringing a revelation that would change my destiny forever. As I was pulled away from my body, the sensation of falling intensified like a silent whirlwind that carried me to a space where there was no time, sound, or reference point. I tried to cling to something, anything that could give me back control, but there were no walls, no direction, no ground where my feet could find a foothold. It was a profound journey into myself and, at the same time, out of everything I knew. The darkness around me was not just an absence of light. It was an absence of meaning, a darkness that seemed to examine me, as if it knew everything about me. When I began to believe that I would be swallowed by that void forever, a light appeared so intensely and so white that it didn't dazzle, but revealed. Instead of assaulting my eyes, that light pierced my soul and illuminated every hidden thought, every secret intention, every reason behind the choices I made. It was impossible to lie in the face of that presence because in the face of truth, there is no room for disguises. The light not only reached me, it enveloped me. The instant I stepped into it, I understood that I wasn't facing an energy, but a person, a living and absolute consciousness. He didn't need to introduce himself because my spirit recognized who he was. Jesus was before me. There was no throne, no choir of angels, no theatricality. There was only him, and that alone was enough to make everything small, silent, and insignificant before his glory. Jesus didn't look at me as if I were a lost cause, but as someone he had always tried to reach while I insisted on running away. His gaze penetrated my soul so deeply that I felt as if I were before a spiritual mirror that reflected not appearance, but essence. He didn't speak of my crimes, and yet I felt each one as if it were being exposed before an invisible screen. Every lie, every manipulation, every life I used as a stepping stone, every soul I pushed to despair. It was all there, not to humiliate me, but so that I might finally see myself as I truly was. Jesus didn't need to enumerate my sins because before him, sin lost its disguise. His silence told me more than any sermon. His gaze held an indescribable mixture of pain and love, as if he suffered for what I had done to myself, not just for what I had done to others. I wasn't standing before an accuser. I was standing before the truth. And when he extended his hand, something began to appear behind me, as if another reality was about to reveal itself. When Jesus extended his hand, the light that had previously enveloped me began to recede slowly, as if guiding me to a deeper understanding of a truth I had always ignored. The light didn't disappear abruptly, it gradually faded, and the more it diminished, the more I realized that something within me was being revealed. Then, the space around me transformed into a kind of environment where I didn't see walls, but felt surrounded by an undeniable spiritual reality. The atmosphere became dense and heavy, and while I still felt Jesus' presence, I began to perceive another dimension, one I never imagined experiencing. I was facing something that couldn't be explained by human words, because it wasn't just a place, it was a consequence. The light of Jesus revealed before me a series of scenes, as if memories and realities were projected one after another, not on a screen, but within my own consciousness. I began to see the faces of everyone I had harmed throughout my life. They weren't generic faces. They were people with names, stories, dreams, and feelings I had never considered. I saw the divorced man looking at his bank statement with despair on his face, trying to understand how someone to whom he had offered trust and affection could empty his account without any hesitation. I saw the woman who missed an investment opportunity because she blindly believed me and ended up with debts she could never repay. I saw tears streaming down faces I didn't even remember, and I realized that every lie I had told had planted emotional and spiritual pain in someone who only wanted to be loved, heard, or acknowledged. There was no way to look away because it wasn't an external accusation. It was the truth that now burned inside. The most devastating revelation was understanding that God did not condemn me. I myself built the path that led me away from the light. Jesus didn't say I was being sent away from him, but showed me that every selfish decision I made distanced me from his presence until I myself chose to live where he wasn't. The absence of God wasn't an imposed punishment. It was the natural destiny of someone who always lived in opposition to the truth. I felt an emptiness so profound that no wealth I ever possessed could fill it. This emptiness wasn't a physical place. It was the complete lack of love, peace, meaning, and purpose, as if every part of my existence was consumed by the awareness that I had wasted the only opportunity to live truthfully. At that moment, I understood something that changed everything. Hell is not a punishment. It is the harvest of a life lived far from God. There were no screams, flames, or monsters. There was only the reality of my own choice. The worst condemnation wasn't the pain I felt, but realizing that He had always been near me, and I was the only one who refused to see it. That's when I desperately wanted a second chance, even knowing I didn't deserve it. The moment I wished for a second chance, something unexpected happened, as if an invisible force were pulling me back to what remained of my earthly life. I heard no words, there was no formal request, no negotiation, and yet I felt as if Jesus had responded to my repentance not with promises, but with mercy. The light that had been fading began to return, filling everything with an indescribable feeling of peace, and at the same time, of responsibility. When the light touched my consciousness, I felt as if the air returned to my lungs and my heart received a command to beat again, and then I was thrown back into my body with a force that almost tore my soul apart. I opened my eyes in the hospital with tubes and machines connected to me, and the first thing I did was not try to move or understand where I was, but to cry with a repentance so profound that it seemed to come from places in my existence that I didn't even know existed. In the days that followed, I slowly awoke to a new reality, where what once had value now seemed irrelevant. I looked at my expensive suitcases and felt ashamed. I looked at jewelry and contracts and felt the weight of the consequences. I knew I couldn't live the same way, because returning to sin would be like throwing my second chance to the ground and trampling it. The first thing I did when I regained my voice and clarity was to ask to speak with the people I had deceived. I didn't know if they would forgive me. I didn't know if I would face prison or lawsuits, but that no longer mattered. I needed to confess, to make amends, to repair. I discovered that when there is true repentance, the fear of loss has no power, because repentance creates the courage to face any consequence. Each phone call I made was an open wound, and each truth spoken was a liberation. For the first time in my life, I was free, not because I escaped judgment, but because I finally stopped running from the truth. It was only then, with my feet back on the ground and my soul aware of eternity, that I understood the purpose of my return. When I began to rebuild my life, I realized that the real battle wasn't about returning the money I stole, nor about facing the potential public exposure of my mistakes, but about dealing with the constant reminder that I stood before Jesus and almost lost everything that could exist after death. The experience I lived through wasn't a dream, nor the imagination of someone disoriented by anesthesia. It was a direct encounter with absolute truth, and this truth showed me that the luxury, recognition, and power I pursued were merely distractions that distanced me from the only real purpose of human existence, which is to live in alignment with divine truth. No matter how much a person achieves in this world, material possessions don't cross the border between life and eternity, and the only weight that remains is the state of the soul before God. Life without repentance is a blind walk away from the light, and those who consciously choose to ignore the inner calling end up discovering too late that the greatest mistake is not losing money, but losing oneself. I've returned to warn you that no one can deceive God. You can build an image, manipulate feelings, accumulate followers, hide sins, and convince the world that you are someone different. But when your eyes close for the last time, there will be no speech, no excuse, no justification, no masks. There will only be you, your essence, and the gaze of the one who knows every intention of your heart. If there is something in your life that distances you from God, don't wait until you lose everything to realize the emptiness it causes. Today could be the day of your change. Today could be the beginning of your return. If this story touched your soul and you feel that God spoke to you through this testimony, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, because here you will find messages that can transform your life and strengthen your faith every day.